The large room was quiet. Too quiet. HFY sat in the witness chair, his forearms shaking slightly. Around him, hundreds of beings from different worlds watched and waited. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked almost like the humans he would talk about today. But none of them knew what he knew. None of them had seen what he had seen. The judge, a tall being with blue skin and no hair, spoke in a calm voice. HFY of the Vorthok Empire, you are here to tell us about the war with humans. Please begin. HFY looked down at his hands. 50 years had passed since the war ended, but the memories were still fresh, like wounds that never healed. He took a deep breath and began to speak. I was a soldier for 300 years before I met my first human. I had fought in 12 wars. I had seen cities burn and fleets destroyed. I thought I knew what war looked like. I was wrong. The room stayed quiet. Everyone leaned forward to hear better. It started on Kepler 442b, a small mining world at the edge of human space. My unit was sent there to take it. Simple job, we thought. There were only 200 humans on the planet. We had 2,000 soldiers. Our weapons were better. Our armor was stronger. Our ships were faster. The war should have been over in a day. HFY paused, remembering. The human leader was called Taemin Kim. He was young, maybe 30 years old in human time. Small, like all humans. When we landed, he sent us a message. Just 3 words, come and take. Some beings in the room made sounds of interest. The judge wrote something down. We laughed at him. 2,000 against 200. What could they do? So we attacked at dawn like we always did. Our war machines moved across the desert toward their base. Everything went as planned for the first hour. HFY's voice got quieter. Then the ground started exploding. He looked up at the room full of faces watching him. The humans had spent weeks digging holes under the sand. Hundreds of holes. When our machines got close, they set off bombs from below. In 10 minutes, we lost half our vehicles. The room was so quiet that HFY could hear his own breathing. But that was just the beginning. As our soldiers ran from the burning machines, the humans came out of the rocks. They had been hiding there for days, waiting. They moved fast like hunters. Each one knew exactly what to do. HFY remembered Taemin Kim running between the rocks, calling out orders to his soldiers. The human moved like he was dancing, never staying in one place long enough for the Vorthok weapons to find him. There was a human female with him, Bora Lee. She was their doctor, but she fought like a warrior. When one of my friends got shot, she ran into the battle to help him. Not her own people, my friend. A Vorthok soldier who had been trying to kill her people all morning. The judge looked surprised. She helped your wounded? Yes, while the battle was still going on. She ran through the gunfire, fixed his wounds, then went back to fighting us. I had never seen anything like it. HFY closed his eyes for a moment. Then there was Woojin Park. He was in charge of their bombs. While we were fighting on the surface, he was underground, setting more traps. Every time we thought we had found a safe place to regroup, the ground would explode again. The room was full of whispers now, beings talking to each other about what they were hearing. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days! We had expected it to be over in 3 hours. Every time we almost won, the humans would do something new. Something we had not seen before. They used our own weapons against us. They turned our strength into weakness. HFY's hands stopped shaking as he got lost in the memory. On the second day, we surrounded their base. They had nowhere to run. Our commander demanded they surrender. Taemin Kim came out alone to talk. He was covered in dirt and blood, but he was smiling. The alien soldier paused, remembering that smile. He told our commander that humans never surrender. Then he showed us something. A small device in his hand. He said it was connected to bombs under our landing ships. If we did not leave the planet in 1 hour, he would destroy our only way home. Gasps filled the room. The judge leaned forward. He was bluffing, of course. We knew he was bluffing. There was no way the humans could have gotten to our ships. They were guarded by our best soldiers. But something in his eyes, something made our commander unsure. HFY looked around the room at all the different faces watching him. So we sent a team back to check on the ships. They found Woojin Park and 2 other humans inside our main ship. They had been there for hours, setting up bombs. Not just on one ship, on all of them. They could have destroyed our entire fleet. The room erupted in noise. Beings talking loudly, making sounds of disbelief. The judge banged his gavel. Quiet, let him continue. HFY waited for the room to settle down. That was when I first understood. These humans were not like other enemies we had fought. They did not just want to win battles. They wanted to win wars, and they were willing to do anything to win. He looked at his hands again. We left that planet. 2,000 soldiers defeated by 200 humans. When we got back to our fleet, our commanders were angry. They said we were weak. They said humans were just lucky. Kethvar's voice got stronger, but I knew better. I had looked into Taemin Kim's eyes when he was bluffing about the bombs. He was not afraid, not even a little bit. He was ready to die, and he was ready to kill all of us to protect his people. The alien soldier stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, ships from many different worlds filled the sky. That was my first lesson about humans. They do not fight to live. They live to fight. And when they fight with everything they have. Their minds, their bodies, their souls. Everything. He turned back to face the room. But that was just the beginning of what I learned about them. The real horror was still to come. Kethvar returned to his seat, his eyes distant as he remembered things he wished he could forget. The room remained silent, waiting for him to continue his story about the humans and their strange way of war. After the mining world, our commanders sent us to Firebase Delta 7. It was a small human base on a moon called Titan 3. Intelligence said there were only 200 humans there. Our job was simple: surround them, cut off their supplies, and wait for them to surrender. The alien soldier's voice became quieter. The base was run by Commander Hyun-Soo Choi. We had studied his file. He was young for a human commander, only 28 years old. He had never lost a battle, but he had never faced odds like this before. Kethvar looked around the room at the many different faces watching him. We brought 3,000 soldiers, enough to take a small city. The humans had no ships to escape with, no way to call for help. Their communication tower had been destroyed in the first attack. We thought it would be easy. He paused, remembering the confidence he and his fellow soldiers had felt. The siege began on a Tuesday, human time. We surrounded their base completely. No way in, no way out. Our snipers watched every window, every door. Our ships blocked the sky above them. All we had to do was wait for them to run out of food and water. The judge made a note on his paper. How long did you expect the siege to last? 1 week, maybe 2 at most. Humans need to eat every day, and they had been cut off for 3 days already. But Commander Choi had other plans. Kethvar's hands began to shake again as he remembered. On the 4th day, something strange happened. We stopped seeing humans in the windows. Our thermal scans showed they were still inside the base, but they were not moving around like before. We thought maybe they were getting weak from hunger. He looked down at his hands. We were wrong. They were digging. The room filled with whispers again. Several beings leaned forward to hear better. While we watched the surface, they were digging tunnels underneath their base. Not just small tunnels, big ones. Wide enough for soldiers to move through quickly. They worked in shifts 24 hours a day. They used their eating utensils, their belt buckles, even pieces of their armor to dig with. Kethvar stood up again and walked to the center of the room. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how they planned to use the tunnels. They were not trying to escape. They were preparing to fight. He stopped walking and faced the room full of listeners. On the 10th day, we decided to probe their defenses. We sent a small group to test their outer walls. The humans let us get close, then opened fire. Normal battle, we thought. But as our soldiers fell back, we noticed something horrible. The alien soldier's voice became almost a whisper. The human bodies from our earlier attacks were gone. All of them. We had killed 37 humans in the first week of fighting, but their bodies had disappeared. Someone in the room made a sound of disgust. We found out why 3 days later. The humans had been using their dead as decoys. They put the armor and weapons on dead bodies and placed them in windows to make us think there were more living humans than there actually were. Our snipers wasted ammunition shooting at corpses while the real humans moved through their tunnels. Kethvar began pacing back and forth, but they did something else with their dead friends, something that still gives me nightmares. They used the blood to confuse our scent trackers. Fourth-act soldiers hunt by smell, and human blood has a very strong scent. They spread it around fake positions to make us think humans were hiding in places where there were none. The room was completely quiet now. Even the judge had stopped writing. The siege went on for weeks. Every few days we would attack, thinking we almost had them. But they always had new tricks. When we broke through their outer walls, we found they had built new walls inside. When we destroyed their water tanks, they showed us they had been collecting rainwater in hidden containers. Kethvar stopped pacing and looked directly at the judge. By day 30, we were starting to get frustrated. Our commanders were asking why 3,000 soldiers could not defeat 200 humans. So we decided to end it with one big attack. His voice got louder. We brought in heavy weapons, plasma cannons that could melt through their walls. We attacked from all sides at once. For the first time in weeks, it looked like we were winning. The alien soldier sat back down in his chair. We broke through their main gate. Our soldiers poured into their base. We thought it was over. But then we heard Commander Choi's voice over their communication system. He was speaking to his soldiers, but we could hear him too. Kethvar closed his eyes. He said, "For those we could not save." Then he pressed a button. The room held its breath. The entire base exploded. Not just the buildings, the ground underneath it. All those tunnels they had been digging for weeks were filled with explosives. When they went off, they took most of our attacking force with them. Gasps filled the room. Several beings stood up from their seats. 800 of my brothers died in that explosion. In 1 second, the humans had killed 800 trained Vorthak soldiers. Kethvar opened his eyes and looked around the room. But 23 humans survived. They had been in the deepest tunnels when the explosion happened. Their leader was a communications officer named Mi Young Seo. She had been trying to call for help for 47 days, even though she knew no help was coming. The alien soldier's voice became soft with something that sounded like respect. When we dug them out of the rubble, they were still trying to fight. Mi Young Seo had a broken arm and could barely walk, but she pointed her weapon at us and told us to stay back. She was protecting the other 22 survivors even though they were all wounded and had no ammunition left. He paused for a long moment. That was when I realized something terrible about humans. They do not fight because they think they can win. They fight because they think they should win. Even when they are outnumbered, even when they are dying, even when they know they cannot possibly survive, they keep fighting. Kethvar looked up at the ceiling. Commander Choi chose to destroy his own base rather than let us capture it. He killed himself and most of his soldiers to deny us victory, and somehow impossibly it worked. We left that moon with fewer soldiers than we came with, and we still had not won. The alien soldier turned to face the room one more time. That was the day I stopped thinking of humans as just another enemy. That was the day I started to fear them. Kethvar took a long drink of water before continuing. His hands were steadier now, but his eyes still held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. After Firebase Delta 7, everything changed. The humans stopped fighting like a normal army. They started using tactics that we had never seen before, tactics that kept us awake at night, afraid to sleep. The alien soldier looked around the room at the hundreds of beings listening to his story. They called it the Ghost Protocol. We did not learn that name until much later, when we captured some of their files. At the time, we just knew that humans were disappearing from battles and then showing up where they should not be. He stood up and walked to a large screen on the wall. With his permission, images appeared showing star maps and fleet positions from the old war. The first time we encountered Ghost Protocol was in the Centauri system. We had taken 3 human colonies there, and were using them as supply bases for our main fleet. The colonies were secure. We had checked every building, every tunnel, every hiding place. No humans left alive. Kethvar pointed to one of the star systems on the map, but supplies kept disappearing. Food vanished from warehouses. Fuel went missing from our ships. At first, we thought our own soldiers were stealing, but then the sabotage began. The room was completely silent as Kethvar described what happened next. Ships would develop mysterious problems right before important battles. Communication systems would fail at the worst possible moments. Weapons would jam during attacks. Small things, but they always happened at the perfect time to help human forces. The alien soldier turned away from the screen to face his audience. It took us months to figure out what was happening. There were humans living inside our bases, inside our ships. They had been there since before we conquered those colonies, hiding in places we never thought to look. A being in the front row raised a tentacle to ask a question. How is that possible? Your scans should have found them. Kethvar nodded. That is what we thought too. But humans are very good at becoming invisible when they need to. They lived in ventilation shafts, in unused storage rooms, in the spaces between walls. They ate scraps and drank condensation from pipes. Some of them lived like that for months. He walked back to his chair but did not sit down. The worst case was a human named Jin Ho Yu. He was a Ghost Protocol operative who infiltrated our flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He lived inside that ship for 4 months without being detected. Kethavar's voice got quieter as he remembered. Jinho was not a big man, even for a human, maybe 60 kilograms, very thin, with dark hair and quiet eyes. But he was the most dangerous enemy I ever encountered. The alien soldier began pacing again. For 4 months, he studied our ship from the inside. He learned our schedules, our security codes, our weaknesses. He listened to our planning meetings through the ventilation system. He watched our officers and learned their habits. Kethavar stopped pacing and looked directly at the judge. When our main fleet moved to attack the human homeworld, Jinho went with us. He had been living on our flagship for so long that he probably knew the ship better than most of our own crew. The room was so quiet that the only sound was the soft hum of the air circulation system. The attack on Earth was supposed to be our final victory. We had gathered every ship we could spare, over 300 vessels, the largest Forthak fleet ever assembled. We were going to end the war in one battle. Kethavar's voice became heavy with old sadness. But when we arrived at the human homeworld, their planetary defense grid was waiting for us. It should have been impossible. Those defenses had been offline for weeks. Our spies had confirmed it. But somehow the humans had reactivated everything. He sat down heavily in his chair. Jinho had spent his 4 months on our flagship learning more than just our ship's layout. He had also been listening to our intelligence reports about Earth's defenses. When we got close to the planet, he used what he had learned to reactivate their defense systems from inside our own ship. Gasps filled the room. Several beings stood up to get a better view of Kethavar. But that was not all he did. While our fleet was trying to fight past the defense grid, Jinho was moving through our flagship, setting charges on critical systems. When he was finished, he sent a message to the human fleet. Kethavar closed his eyes, remembering. The message was very short. Just 2 words. Ghost Protocol. Then our ship exploded from the inside. The alien soldier opened his eyes and looked around the room. Jinho died in that explosion, along with 3,000 of my brothers. But before he died, he had crippled our command ship and given the human fleet the opening they needed to break through our lines. Kethavar stood up again and walked to the window. After we studied the wreckage, we found something that still haunts me. Jinho had prepared 17 different escape plans. 17 ways he could have gotten off our ship alive. He had studied every shuttle, every escape pod, every possible way to survive. He turned back to face the room, but he chose not to use any of them. He chose to stay on our ship and complete his mission, even though he knew it would kill him. The alien soldier's voice became very quiet. That was when I truly understood what we were fighting. Humans who would give up certain escape to ensure their mission succeeded. Soldiers who would live in hell for months just for one chance to strike back at their enemies. Kethavar walked back to the center of the room. But Jinho was not unique. After the flagship incident, we started finding evidence of Ghost Protocol operatives throughout our fleet. A human named Sujin Nam had been living in our supply depot for 6 weeks, slowly poisoning our food stores. Another called Dong Hakim had infiltrated our prison ships and was conducting psychological warfare on our own soldiers. He looked around at all the different faces watching him. Dongha was especially frightening. He did not try to escape or sabotage anything. He just talked to our guards. He told them stories about human determination, about battles where humans had won against impossible odds. He made our soldiers doubt themselves. Kethavar's hands began to shake again. By the time we caught him, half our prison guards were afraid to fight humans. They had heard so many stories about human tactics that they expected to lose before battles even began. The alien soldier sat back down in his chair. That was the power of Ghost Protocol. It was not just about the sabotage or the intelligence gathering. It was about making us afraid, making us look over our shoulders, making us wonder if there was a human hiding somewhere nearby, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He looked up at the ceiling. They turned our own ships into prisons. We were afraid to sleep because we might not wake up. We were afraid to eat because our food might be poisoned. We were afraid to trust our own equipment because it might have been sabotaged. Kethavar brought his gaze back down to meet the eyes of his listeners. But the worst part was not knowing how many of them there were. Every time we found one Ghost Protocol operative, we wondered how many more we had missed. How many humans were still hiding in our ships, in our bases, in our very command centers? The alien soldier's voice became barely a whisper. We never did find out. Even now, 50 years later, I sometimes wonder if there are still humans hiding somewhere in the ruins of our old ships, waiting for orders that will never come. Kethvar rubbed his temples with two of his hands, while the other two gripped the arms of his chair. The memories he was about to share were perhaps the most confusing of all. What I am going to tell you next will sound impossible. After everything I have described, the ghost protocol, the suicide missions, the willingness to die rather than surrender, you will not believe what else humans are capable of. The alien soldier looked around the room at the many faces watching him. Humans have another side, a side that makes no sense when you consider everything else about them. They show mercy to their enemies. Several beings in the room made sounds of confusion. The judge leaned forward with interest. I first saw this during the Battle of Proxima Station. It was a fierce fight that lasted for 18 hours. My unit was trapped in a damaged section of the station after a human bombing run. Half of my squad was wounded and we were running out of ammunition. Kethvar's voice became softer as he remembered. A human medic found us there. Her name was Yunji Han. She was small even for a human female with short black hair and gentle eyes. She was carrying a medical bag and wearing the white markings that meant she was a non-combatant. He paused, lost in the memory. We pointed our weapons at her, of course. She was the enemy. But she just stood there looking at our wounded soldiers. Then she did something I will never understand. She asked if she could help them. The room was completely silent. The judge had stopped writing and was staring at Kethvar with wide eyes. At first, we thought it was a trick, some kind of human deception, but Yunji just waited patiently while we decided what to do. When one of my wounded friends started bleeding badly, she stepped forward and pointed at her medical supplies. Kethvar stood up and walked to the window again. Our squad leader told her she could try to help, but if she made any suspicious moves, we would kill her. Yunji nodded and knelt down next to my friend. For the next 2 hours, she worked to save his life. The alien soldier turned back to face the room. While she worked, the battle continued around us. We could hear explosions and gunfire from other parts of the station. Her own people were still fighting and dying, but she stayed with us, treating our wounds. Kethvar's voice filled with something that sounded like wonder. She saved 6 Vorthak soldiers that day, 6 enemies who had been trying to kill her people just hours before. When she was finished, she gave us extra medical supplies and told us how to treat the wounds properly. He walked back to his chair but remained standing. Before she left, I asked her why she had helped us. She looked at me with those gentle eyes and said something I have never forgotten. Because you were hurt, and I could help. The alien soldier sat down heavily. That was my first encounter with human mercy, but it was not my last. Over the remaining months of the war, I saw it again and again. Human soldiers risking their lives to save wounded enemies. Human medics treating our injured even while battles raged around them. Kethvar looked down at his hands. There was a rescue specialist named Xiong-Ho Lee. His job was to find and recover captured human soldiers from our prison camps. But every time he rescued his own people, he also freed any wounded Vorthak prisoners he found. The alien soldier's voice became stronger. I was captured myself near the end of the war. The prison camp where they held me was run by humans, but they treated us better than many of our own commanders had. We were given food, medical care, and clean places to sleep. He looked up at the room full of listeners. There was a human there called Young-Mi Park. She was some kind of mind doctor, trained to help soldiers who had been damaged by war. She spent hours talking to Vorthak prisoners, trying to help them deal with the terrible things they had seen. Kethvar's hand stopped shaking as he remembered. Young-Mi worked with a Vorthak soldier named Tekvol who had lost his entire family in a human bombing run. He was filled with hate and rage, and he tried to attack every human he saw. But Young-Mi was patient with him. She talked to him every day, helping him understand his anger. The alien soldier stood up again and began pacing. The strange thing was that Young-Mi had also lost family in the war. Her brother had been killed in one of our attacks on a human colony. But she never let her own pain stop her from helping. Tekvol. Kethvar stopped pacing and faced the judge. But the most confusing thing about human mercy was how they balanced it with their ruthless tactics. The same soldiers who would risk everything to save a wounded enemy would also plan devastating attacks against our forces. He returned to his chair. I learned about this from a human captain named Haiwan Kang. She had been part of a rescue mission to save human prisoners from one of our detention facilities. The mission was incredibly dangerous. They had to fight through 3 layers of defenses to reach the prison. Kethavar's voice became quiet again. During the rescue, Captain Kang's team could have escaped easily after freeing their own people. But they discovered that we were also holding civilian prisoners from other species, beings, who had nothing to do with the war between humans and Vorthak, the alien soldier, looked around the room, so they changed their entire plan. Instead of a quick escape, they launched a full assault on the prison to free everyone, human and non-human alike. They risked the success of their primary mission to save beings they had never met. Kethavar closed his eyes. 23 humans died in that rescue operation. They could have saved their own people and left safely, but they chose to stay and fight for strangers instead. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the judge. This was what we could never understand about humans. How could the same species that used Ghost Protocol and suicide bombing also show such mercy to their enemies? How could they be so ruthlessly effective in war, and yet so caring toward the wounded and captured? The alien soldier's voice became thoughtful. I think I finally understand it now after 50 years of thinking about it. Humans do not fight because they hate their enemies. They fight because they love their friends. And when the fighting is over, that love extends even to those who were trying to kill them. Kethavar stood up and walked to the center of the room. The mercy was not weakness, it was strength. It took more courage for Yunjihan to treat wounded Vorthak soldiers than it would have taken for her to shoot them. It was harder for young Mike Park to help Thekvol heal than it would have been to let him suffer. He looked around at all the different faces in the room, and somehow, this mercy made them even more terrifying as enemies, because it meant they were not fighting out of anger or hatred. They were fighting out of principle, and principles do not get tired or give up or lose hope. The alien soldier returned to his chair one more time. By the end of the war, some of our soldiers were more afraid of human mercy than human weapons, because when an enemy shows you kindness, it becomes much harder to hate them, and when you cannot hate your enemy, it becomes much harder to fight them. Kethavar's voice became very quiet. That was perhaps humans' greatest weapon of all. Not their bombs or their tactics or their willingness to die. It was their ability to make us question why we were fighting them in the first place. Kethavar took another long drink of water. His voice was getting hoarse from talking, but he was nearing the end of his story. The part that had changed everything. By the final year of the war, we thought we had won. Human colonies had fallen one by one. Their fleet was scattered and broken. Survivors were hiding in the outer systems, running from our ships like frightened animals. The alien soldier looked around the room with tired eyes. Our commanders were already planning victory celebrations. The human homeworld of Earth was surrounded by our fleets. All their major colonies were under our control. It was only a matter of time before they surrendered completely. Kethavar stood up slowly, his movements showing the weight of his years. But the humans had been planning something else, something that took us 2 years to understand. Even after it was over, he walked to the large screen again, and new images appeared showing fleet movements from the final months of the war. What we thought was a retreat was actually a strategy. Every time human forces pulled back from a battle, they were learning something new about us. Every defeat taught them something about how we fought, how we lived, how we thought. The alien soldier pointed to the star charts on the screen. Admiral J. Sung-O was in charge of what remained of the human fleet. We had studied his record. He had lost more battles than he had won. Our intelligence said he was a poor commander, probably kept in charge only because there was no one else left. Kethavar's voice became grim. We were wrong about that too. He turned away from the screen to face his audience. Admiral O had been losing battles on purpose. Every time his forces retreated, they took detailed scans of our ships, our weapons, our tactics. They studied how we supplied our fleets, how we communicated with our homeworld, how we maintained our equipment. The alien soldier began pacing again. But most importantly, they learned about our homeworld itself. Every time we sent supplies or reinforcements from Vorthak Prime, human scouts followed them back. Not to attack, but to study. They mapped our planet's defenses, our cities, our infrastructure. Kethavar stopped pacing and looked directly at the judge. What they discovered was our weakness, something so obvious that we had never thought to protect it. The room leaned forward as one, waiting to hear what came next. Vorthak Prime is not a natural world. Our ancestors terraformed it thousands of years ago, turning a dead rock into a paradise. To do this, they built massive atmospheric processors, machines that maintain our air, our climate, our weather patterns. Kethvar's voice became very quiet. Those machines are controlled from a single location, a central facility that was built to be efficient, not secure. After all, who would be crazy enough to attack our homeworld? The alien soldier sat down in his chair. The final battle began on a Tuesday, just like the siege of Firebase Delta 7. Admiral O arrived at Vorthak Prime with only 47 ships, all that remained of the once mighty human fleet. We had over 300 ships defending our homeworld. He closed his eyes, remembering. Our commanders were confident. Even if every human ship sacrificed itself, they could not do serious damage to our world. But Admiral O did not attack our cities or our military bases. Kethvar opened his eyes. Instead, he sent a single message to our planetary command center. The message contained detailed technical specifications for every atmospheric processor on our world, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. The alien soldier's voice became hollow, along with the technical. Data was a simple statement: surrender now, or watch your world become uninhabitable. Gasps filled the room. Several beings stood up in shock. Our commanders thought it was another bluff like Taman Kim's threat at the mining world, so they prepared to destroy the human fleet with overwhelming force. Kethvar looked down at his hands. That was when Admiral O proved he was not bluffing. Human ships moved to precise positions around our planet, not positions chosen for attacking our defenses, but positions that gave them clear shots at our atmospheric processors. The alien soldier's voice became even quieter. The first processor they hit was in the northern continent, a single missile strike that shut down the climate control for millions of Vorthak citizens. Within hours, the weather patterns began to change. He looked up at the room full of horrified faces, but they did not stop there. Admiral O sent another message. You have 1 hour to surrender. For every hour you delay, another processor will be destroyed. Kethvar stood up and walked to the window. Our military commanders wanted to fight. They were willing to sacrifice some atmospheric processors to eliminate the human fleet. But our civilian leaders understood what was happening. He turned back to face the room. The humans were not trying to kill us directly. They were threatening to destroy our ability to live on our own world. If all the atmospheric processors were destroyed, Vorthak Prime would become a dead rock again in a matter of months. The alien soldier's voice filled with something that might have been admiration. It was brilliant and terrible at the same time. They had found a way to threaten our entire civilization without committing genocide. They could force us to surrender without having to kill billions of innocent Vorthak citizens. Kethvar walked back to his chair. But the most frightening thing was not the threat itself. It was how perfectly the humans had planned it. They had spent 2 years learning exactly how our world worked, exactly what we needed to survive, exactly how to defeat us without becoming monsters themselves. He sat down slowly. There was more, of course. While Admiral O's fleet threatened our atmospheric processors, other human forces struck at our supply lines, our communication networks, our backup systems. Every weakness they had discovered during their long retreat was exploited at the same moment. The alien soldier looked around the room. Our commanders realized they were not fighting a desperate enemy making a last stand. They were fighting an enemy that had spent years preparing for this exact moment. Every battle, every retreat, every apparent defeat had been leading to this. Kethvar's voice became very quiet. The surrender came 6 hours after Admiral O's ultimatum began. Not because we were cowards, but because we finally understood what we were facing. An enemy that fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with their minds and their patience and their ability to see patterns that we had missed. He closed his eyes again. After the war ended, I learned more about Admiral O's strategy. It was called the Long Game, a plan that required the human fleet to lose battles for 2 years, while they gathered the information they needed for final victory. The alien soldier opened his eyes and looked directly at the judge. Think about that. Admiral O ordered his own forces to retreat and lose battles, knowing that thousands of his people would die, knowing that his colonies would be captured, knowing that he would be seen as a failure, also that he could gather the intelligence needed to win the war with minimal casualties on both sides. Kethvar's voice filled with wonder. That level of strategic thinking, of sacrifice, of long-term planning, we had never seen anything like it. The humans had outthought us, outplanned us, and outmaneuvered us at every level. He stood up one final time. When our surrender was announced, Admiral O sent one last message to our homeworld. It was just 2 words: war over. The alien soldier looked around the room at all the faces watching him. But for those of us who had fought against humans, the war was not over. Because we knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species capable of planning victory through apparent defeat, capable of showing mercy to their enemies while destroying them completely. Keithavar's voice became barely a whisper, and we knew that if we ever faced them again, they would be ready for us, because humans never stop learning, never stop planning, and never stop preparing for the next battle. The room was completely silent as the alien soldier finished his account of humanity's greatest victory.